welcome back to my third episode. And in this episode, I'm going to share with you one of the most important parts in the journey of my caregiving. And this is the journey of my pregnancy and the journey of caregiving together. Well, to sum up me as a caregiver, and my basic rule that I always followed was I always try to live life as normal as possible. And of course, I always celebrated life any moment that I was given the opportunity to. Well, that being said, it was time to consciously put that rule into practice. Well, going back, when Sumir and myself got married, we did decide to have two children at least, and with the age gap of about 4 years maximum. And Rihan was now 3 years old, and it was time for us to get our next baby and to start the discussion. Well, in between the whole process of 4 years of dialysis, by now the question was it the right time to have a baby? After much discussion within us, the doctors, and our immediate circle, we have decided to have our second baby. And the one thing that we were quite sure, and we had this very strong intuition, was when I fall pregnant, we knew that somehow would be the time for Sumi to have his transplant. And in case that happens, so we discussed how we're going to be dealing with it. It all seemed really easy at the first while we discussed with it and we decided to go ahead with the pregnancy. But however, first 5 months of my pregnancy had gone by, and all of a sudden one night around 2 a.m. in the morning, we had this call from the hospital. Most of you would have experienced this moment if you had a cadaver donor. And the call was giving us information how there was an organ available and we could come to the hospital for our transplant surgery. So like any of you guys, we packed our bags. We were quite excited. We were quite overwhelmed, and we reached the hospital. On reaching the hospital, we ran a couple of tests to see the compatibility between Sumir and the organ that was available. And one of the most unforgettable moments in this episode would be that night of 8 hours in the hospital. There were so many things running in our mind. And to mention a few, we were scared. We were scared of the new life. We were scared of the new baby coming in. We were overwhelmed of what life had in store for us. We were confused. We were concerned, since we have an older child, how we're going to be managing everything together. And I think most importantly, we were really tired. We were extremely tired. I was 5 months in my pregnancy. I have not slept through the night. Sumir had finished dialysis, and then he joined us in the hospital as we got the call for the transplant. So at this point of time, he's not eaten. He was asked not to eat in case the surgery takes place. So it was extremely difficult going through that night. And Sumir was feeling really bad for me, and I was feeling really bad for him. And it was a lot of mixed emotions that was actually happening at that point of time. We didn't speak much, but it was around 9:30, 10 in the morning that the doctor had told us that the organ was compatible and it was time to go ahead with our transplant. Well, it was a sign of relief, and Sumir was ready, and we sent him for his transplant. And yes, he came back, he recovered well from his transplant, and we got him back home right about 7 days after the transplant. So we were 1 week through our transplant, and Sumir would be discharged from the hospital any day. But it was time for me to go for my routine checkups to the hospital. So I had gone to visit my doctor, and my doctor had done my insulin test. And for some reason, my results were not normal. So my doctor inquired about my diet or my recent activities, and very casually, I did mention to her about Sumir's transplant. So she just mentioned to me, oh, it's just probably some kind of stress. So we'll do the test again after 2 days. And I very clearly remembered my instant reaction when she mentioned to me stress. because I never felt stressed during this time of my life. And I have to make you understand something that I experienced during this part of my journey. And exactly at this period of my life, I had this strength. Um, it's very difficult for me to explain to you what the strength felt like. But it was a combination of Iron Man, Superman, Hulk, and Hercules together. I could just deal with anything in my life. And I always thought the strength was the divine energy that I had because I was carrying a baby. And so I couldn't agree with my doctor that I could be going through stress. So my doctor said, okay, we will do a couple of tests and we'll figure it out. So we had a deal. And 2 days later, it was time to discharge Sumit from the hospital. And we were so happy to have him back home and to start functioning as a family together again. But once Sumit came home, things were not as the way we thought it was. His parameters were not normal. His creatinine was extremely high. He had problems with infections, so he had to go back to the hospitals and get admitted. He had and he had something which probably those of you who are familiar or have taken immunosuppressant drugs or steroids probably could relate to this. He had a lot of emotional swings. He could cry just watching a movie or reading a book. He could get agitated really fast. And that was what was happening to him in one side of the room. On the other side of the room, in the house, rather than the other side of the house, it was me, and I was going through something that I never experienced in my first pregnancy. I had severe emotional swings myself, and I had this need to talk to somebody and feel a mental connect that I knew somebody was there with me. I had very, very strong physical, intimate demands that were very abnormal. And so this is what I was going through on the other side of the house. And we now have a 3-year-old baby. So just to give you a scene of what was happening at home. And through all this, please note, I still had that strength that I spoke to you about. And days went by, and we were just sailing through. We were doing decently well through the pregnancy and dealing with the first transplant. And it was the 2nd of April, and I had to get admitted to deliver my baby. And we heard the good news that it was a baby girl. We couldn't have been more happier hearing the news. And it was probably one of the first days Samir officially actually came out of the house to the hospital to receive his new baby. And I was discharged 3 days later from the hospital. I was back home, and things started looking fine and normal. While we still had constant visits to the hospital for Sumit, I was settling with the new role of handling a newborn and a son who was 3 years old. And at the same time, I was dealing with a transplant patient. So these were the three things that I was swapping around with. But once my daughter turned a few months, I say about 3 months, things began to change. Something started happening that I was not aware of. And I knew there was something abnormal happening in my head. I would frequently go quiet. I would frequently get angry. I would snap. My emotions were completely displaced, and I thought I was going through post-pregnancy depression. Either which ways, I decided to seek help. So I went and met my psychologist. It was the first visit to meet a psychologist. And it took us a couple of sessions where I took her through my journey of pregnancy and the whole transplant. And I remember very clearly me specifically mentioning to her about the strength that I had during this whole period. And after a few sessions, she told me, Maryann, I need to tell you that you've been functioning on an auto mode. Well, dear friends, this is the message I want to pass to you through this video. So this term auto mode was very new to me. So she went on to explain that when you're functioning on auto mode, it's like a tuning in that we make, and we actually function like robots. We don't let our emotions get the better or the worst of us. And somebody could stab us through, and we won't even feel pain. We can just keep moving forward. And it completely hurt me to know that I put myself in such a zone. And I really want to request all you guys who are caregivers, either taking care of a sick one or an older person or a child, that it's okay to say, I cannot hold the fort anymore. It is okay to say, I need a break. And it's okay to say, I am done. But what is not okay is for you to tune into this auto mode zone. And what is not okay is for you to land up with mental illness or depression. Because as I shared this part of my journey with a number of caregivers, I realized that most caregivers are not even aware that we could get into mental illness. We are so used to loving and caring for another person that I think we just forget to love and care for ourselves. So, that being said, this is the message that I want to request you guys to take away, and please imply it in your life, even if you're not a caregiver. It's an important lesson I've learned in my life. And I'm so grateful to my little baby who came into my life at that point of time and actually made me learn the lesson at this part of my journey. Well, if you have any interesting journeys like this along with your caregiving, especially if it is pregnancy, I would love to hear your story and learn from it as well. And that brings me to the end of my third episode. And this is me signing off, wishing you all a good day and God bless you all.